If you're looking for rhythmic string ensemble patterns, you've probably come across at least one of these three libraries: Native Instruments Action Strings 1, Action Strings 2, and Spitfire Audio's Symphonic Motions. But how do these libraries compare, and which one is right for you? That's what we're here to find out. But before we start, I just wanted to say that this video isn't sponsored or paid for in any way. These are just my personal opinions on these libraries. But if you want to support me and my channel, you can do that on my Buy Me a Coffee page, which is also where you can find my 48-minute breakdown video of my full mock-up of the concert suite from the Polar Express. My Buy Me a Coffee page is linked in the video description and in the pinned comment. But with that out of the way, let's dive right in. Okay, so I haven't written any musical examples for this video. I just intend to show you the raw out-of-the-box sound of these libraries, and then I'm going to talk about what they do and how they do it, because that's actually important here. If you haven't really looked into these libraries yet, they may appear to all be doing the same thing, and that's not quite true. So we will talk about that and also about their weaknesses. Because especially symphonic motions as one that comes to mind, but we will get to that. Okay, so I start with Action Strings 1. This is a very simple phrase, but it tells you a few things. The library sounds pretty dry out of the box. And when you release a note, it just sort of cuts off. And just to talk briefly about what is included in the library, there are basic rhythmic patterns like you just heard. And then there are also more interesting ones, so to speak. Let me see. Something like this, for example. And you get 10 phrases that you can use at a time, and you can switch between them via key switches or by clicking these indicators here. So Action Strings 1 as well as 2 includes basic rhythms and also, well, I don't know if you can quite call it melodic phrases, but phrases that are not on the same pitch throughout, but that have some form of melodic movement, so to speak. I will show you an example of Action Strings 2 as well. Action Strings 2 in action, so to speak. And something that may immediately stand out to you here is that Action Strings 2 splits everything into a high ensemble and a low ensemble, and these ensembles are doing different things at the same time. And you can control and edit them individually. So we will get into that in a bit, but Action Strings 2 actually has very deep options to customize these phrases and sort of build new ones out of smaller pieces. And you can do that individually for the high and the low ensemble. But in terms of the overall sound and the room tone, this is relatively similar to Action Strings 1. Okay, this is the first example from Symphonic Motions, and there are a few things that may already stand out to you here. First of all, the interface looks confusing at first. It's actually quite simple. I will explain how it works in a bit. But the way you interact with this is definitely different. from action strings 1 and 2, which makes sense because what the library is actually designed for is not quite the same thing. I will talk about that in a bit. But this is one thing that may have stood out to you, and the other thing is the overall room sound. This is definitely a much wetter library. I've been using Mix 1. I will give you a quick idea of the microphone positions as well. So this is the close position. And as you can hear, the close position gives you a very distinct idea of where the instruments are in the room. It started on the left with the violins, and I believe this has no violas, so it's violins and cellos. The cellos are on the right, so if you get to the lower notes, you will hear the sound more spread more evenly across the stereo field, as long as you are still playing high notes as well, of course. So this was the close position, and I will now show you the ambient one for a comparison. So this is a very wet sound, obviously. I will talk about the microphone positions for action strings 1 and 2 as well, because symphonic motions definitely gives you a much broader range in terms of microphone positions. Action strings 1 actually doesn't really have microphone positions, if I'm remembering correctly. You get a stage and a far position. So this is stage. So that's very dry with the reverb disabled, by the way. If it was actually on, it would be yellow. And the far position is not that much wetter, which is true for Action Strings 2 as well. Action Strings 2 is a sequel to Action Strings 1, obviously, but it doesn't share any content with 1. It's supposed to be a rethought, re-engineered, and much deeper version of Action Strings 1, sort of. And as a part of that, you get more microphone options, but don't get too excited because, in my opinion, they don't do all that much. So if I disable the internal reverb here, and I will show you the close position. This is pretty much bone dry. I can show you the spot as well. Which is really as close as it gets. But if I show you the far microphone position for contrast now, that's not really a huge difference. I would even say that you don't really, at least I don't bother even going to that page. I leave it on the mix position, and I would then apply my own reverb on top of that. Because you do get 5 microphone positions or 4 and a mix in theory, but the difference is not that great. While with symphonic motions, you actually get options to really shape the sound. So that's one important difference, I would say. But you can, of course, apply your own reverb on top, which is what I always do. I will show you my favorite setting for Action Strings 1, which is, by the way, my favorite out of these 3, or at least the one that I used the most. Even though it's by far the oldest one. I am setting this to the Master EQ1, which is a change to the sound I like to make. This is without the EQ setting. And then EQ1 and 2. And I just like EQ1, that's personal taste. And I always leave it on the far microphone position. And then without the internal reverb and with my own reverb on top that I will enable here, The rich long haul is one that I like, and I will set it to -7 or something. This would be the setting that I use most often. Out of all these 3 libraries and the ways you can use them, actually this specific very simple rhythm is also the one I use most often in my own music. And this would sound like this. And you can then, of course, stack all sorts of things on top of that to make it actually more interesting. But this fast repeating string rhythm is just something I like to use in a lot of my music, this specific phrase. So to sum this part up, if you want to shape the sound of the room, Symphonic Motions actually lets you do that with real microphone positions. And for action strings 1 and 2, you more or less have to rely on your own reverb. So let's talk about Symphonic Motions a little bit more. What actually is this interface? This interface is the reason, or perhaps caused by the fact that Symphonic Motions isn't quite the same as action strings 1 and 2. Because the idea for Symphonic Motions is that you can assign different articulations for different parts of the playable range. So the x-axis here stands for the playable range, and the y-axis stands for the different rhythms and articulations that you can use. So right now I have everything set to the same rhythm and articulation, but I can, for example, say that I want pizzicato down here, and this shows up on the keyboard here as blue keys. And now the yellow keys will have the normal bowing, and the blue keys will have pizzicato. Or I could, for example, make the upper range Colenio. And there's another thing you probably noticed. There's an overlay, which you can see here. You can choose from different articulations that you can use as overlays. You can also disable them. And so always when you push a key, you will hear this overlay on top of the phrase. And this is really interesting for several reasons. For one, it's something that the other libraries don't really allow you to do, at least not within one instance. But I sort of have a conspiracy theory as to why this is there. I will disable this, and then I will set all of this to the same rhythm. And I will just play a few beginnings of the phrases, and maybe something will stand out to you. This definitely sounds like it's cutting into the beginning of the note. The very first note of the phrase does not sound natural. This is not true for all articulations and rhythms at the same extent, but at some points it's really noticeable. And this overlay feature sort of allows you to cover that up. If you put the spiccato overlay on top of this, you won't really notice it. But if you don't want that, then you may get into trouble because, like I said, this can be quite noticeable. and it's just not a great thing to have in there. If I disable this overlay, I can show you a little workaround that's okay, but I don't think that this should be, you shouldn't have to do this. This is not an inexpensive library, unless you got it as part of the ton last year. But this workaround shouldn't be necessary, in my opinion. And let me change that back to mix 1, actually. You can increase the attack value here. And if you go to something like 150 milliseconds, something like that, you won't notice it as much because it will obviously fade into the phrase and you don't hear this cut-off phrase start to the same extent. But 25 milliseconds is the default, and they chose that, and it doesn't sound great. It's not a huge deal, but I don't like that. But let's talk a little bit more about what Symphonic Motions was actually designed for. There's a ton of presets here, or, well, I don't know, 20, 30. Enough to get you started anyway. And I will just show you a few of them to give you an idea of what this library is meant to do. These presets also affect the microphone positions, by the way. We will see that in another one. And by the way, I didn't rehearse this before. This is just a random preset that I chose for this right now. And the choppy phrase beginnings are really noticeable here. Maybe I'm a little bit obsessive when it comes to that. I don't know if it bothers you to the same extent, but this really should be better. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on here, obviously. We have some collegno, soltasto, pizzicato, sulpont, and the normal bowing. So what this is good for interesting rhythmic textures, I would say. While action strings 1 and 2 give you these precise rhythms that you can put at the forefront of your musical piece if you want. Symphonic Motions is more something that I would put in the background as a moving rhythmic texture, like I said. So that's what I meant when I said that these libraries are actually designed to do different things, even though they may appear similar if you don't look too much into them. So now that we've discussed Symphonic Motions, I also want to talk briefly about Action Strings 2. But please note that I'm not really an expert on this particular library because I don't like the sound that much, and I sort of miss these really easy and quick options from Action Strings 1, where you can just make 1 or 2 basic adjustments, put a reverb on top, and you're good to go. So I haven't really used Action Strings 2 that much, other than playing around with it when I first got it. But one thing I definitely have to mention, even though, like I said, I'm not an expert and you can refer to the official walkthrough for that, one thing I have to mention is the editor page, because this is probably the main improvement over Action Strings 1. Of course, it only is an improvement if you actually need it, I guess. But what this allows you to do is to really customize these phrases. You can see here that these phrases are made out of individual small building blocks. And if you double-click one of them, you get a few categories to choose from. Something like false, perhaps. And then you get a bunch of these little blocks to choose from. And you can just insert that here. And now the phrase will start like this. Oh, wrong track, sorry. You can also lengthen and shorten the phrase, and there are really a bunch of these little blocks that you can use here. And you can do this for the low ensemble as well, so you have the ability to customize them individually. And for Action Strings 1, there actually isn't that much to talk about. The options are pretty simple. You get basic tempo options here, 10 slots for phrases, like I said, a good collection of phrases to choose from. This is still going through my reverb, by the way. Just be aware that the library sounds much drier than that, like I already demonstrated. Yeah, like I said, the options are pretty basic here. Personally, I'm not really bothered by that. I think that this is just a really straightforward workflow. Of course, it doesn't give you the same amount of flexibility as Action Strings 2. In theory, Action Strings 2 is the better library. Action Strings 2 also comes with a bunch of short articulations so that you can not just edit these phrases, but also add to them with your completely original own ideas. And Action Strings 2 allows you to export the MIDI, which I believe Action Strings 1 doesn't. Personally, I never wanted to, because, at least in my opinion, the whole point of having a phrase-based library like that is not to be lazy, but to use the natural flow of the real performance. And if I export that to put it into another library where I have only individual notes that have been recorded, I lose the musicality of this rhythm, because players will sort of settle into a rhythm and the bow will change direction, and you lose all of that when you just stitch together individual notes. So the whole point of having a phrase-based library like that, in my opinion, is to not export the MIDI in a way, but then of course you don't have to use it like that. You don't have to give the MIDI to another string library. I believe the example that they use in their walkthrough is that you can then, for example, layer a rhythm with woodwinds, and you can just export the MIDI from the strings to give it to a woodwind library. That's really handy, of course. So like I said, in theory, Action Strings 2 is probably the better library. If you get one of the native instruments complete bundles, you probably get both of them anyway. And like I said, Action Strings 1 remains my favorite, but also I'm just used to it. This is actually one of the first libraries that I ever bought. I believe my first ones, I don't know, this may have been number 7 or something like that. So this has been with me for quite a few years now. It's a really old library. It was old when I bought it, I think. But Action Strings 1 is the one that makes it into my music most often. To sum this up, I can also show you this little summary that I wrote. These are basically my keynotes for this video. Action Strings 1 is the most basic, but I like the way it allows you to shape the sound really quickly with just 1 or 2 buttons, and then you put your own reverb on top and you're done. At least that's what I usually do. Action Strings 2 has these individual high and low ensembles that you can use and edit at the same time and individually. And it certainly is more flexible than Action Strings 1. And even though it does have more microphone positions, which also means larger footprint on your disc, of course, it's in a way a little bit harder to shape sonically, in my opinion, just because it misses these handy buttons that I like so much about the first one. And Symphonic Motions has a very wet sound compared to these other two. The microphone positions here actually give you real options, real flexibility. There are no melodic phrases for Symphonic Motions, but you get these overlays, which you sort of need because, like I showed you, the phrase beginnings can be pretty rough. And it allows for complex articulation layouts, which is very different from what these other two libraries do. So that's my comparison of Spitfire Audio's symphonic motions and Native Instruments Action Strings 1 and 2. Let me know your thoughts on these libraries in the comments below. And also let me know if you have any further questions that were not answered by the video, and I will do my best to answer them in the comments. Actually, while you are down there, please don't forget to like and share and subscribe and ring the notification bell and do all these things that YouTube wants you to do so that the almighty algorithm will know that this video is at least somewhat helpful or interesting and hopefully recommend it to more people. See you soon.